Happy Friday, everyone. It seems like a good day to talk about time slips. I like to talk just as much about that type of thing as I do timelines and all those kinds of things. What is a time slip? Well, that's when something from either the past and or future comes and sort of like comes and hits that reality hits your present moment reality. In other words, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you're thinking, something seems different, like a lot of times no sounds or who knows, different, the buildings are different, everything else, and either you find yourself in another timeline, or you find yourself in, which is a present moment timeline, or you find yourself in a past and or future. That's a time slip. Now, the few stories I have today are more from the past, but I also like the future time slips. Those are really cool. Very cool. Anyway, there is a certain street, I should say, in Liverpool, England, and those of you a lot of you English people probably know about this, and maybe some of you other people do. In Liverpool, England, on, I think it's Bold Street. That seems to be a part of England that has a lot of time slips. Why? They have their theories on, I think some have theories about the rails or something sort of circular and tight, or there was limestone and quartz deposits below. Who knows? But we know sometimes portals are, opened up. They're, portals all over the place anyway. So, but there are certain places, whatever scientific reason, where people are able to experience either the past and or present. Not past and present, of course the present, the past and or the future. And so, in this first story, and some of these stories are on Liverpool and Bold Street, and some of them are who knows where. This first story is about a lady, and this was back in the 1980s, and this is a Bold Street one. She was in a cafe on the street, inside, of course, in a cafe. And she looked outside, and all of a sudden it didn't seem quite sunny like it had before. Maybe like the sun had gone on, some clouds had gone over the sun or something. And there wasn't quite as many people out as there had been. And the people that were out were, let me see what she says, oh right, dressed in the 1950s style. And all of a sudden, a guy was sitting by her that was in like a 1950s type of suit, like you would have, probably like a businessman suit. And he started talking to her. And of course she talked back, because it would be rude not to, right? But she was thinking, what? And she turned around real quick to look out the window again, and everything had gone back to normal. It was really sunny out. There was a whole lot of people, and they were dressed like, the 1980s. And she turned around, the guy wasn't there. And I have to say, on Bold Street, it seems to hit in the 1950s and the 1960s. I think rare is a case that it usually only hits the 1950s or 60s. Why this error? I don't know. Why that seems to be stuck in the 1950s and 60s is a mystery. We'll see. There's also a girl, I don't remember her name. All these stories are on the internet anyway. She wanted to get a baby gift for her sister who was having a baby. also, like I said, on the street. And she went into the store that she never saw before, and she found called Mother Care, and she found a lot of several little things there, and she was excited because they weren't very expensive, like she thought they would be. And she went to pay for it with her credit card, and they said, "What is that?" And they said, "Sorry, we only take cash." Do you remember those days when they only took cash? I think they started having credit cards when I started becoming aware of those things anyway, so. But I'm sure she was either in the 1950s or 60s in that time. She went back home. Of course, she had to put the stuff out because she had no cash. And she told her mother about that, and her mother said, "Oh, all right, I think there was a store like that around a long time ago. Now there's a bank there. I know because I banked there." And she's like, no, there was a Mother Care store." So she takes her mother back because she's not believing her. And her mom was right. When the next time she went, it was a bank. Because sometimes you can be on that street and nothing happens at all. And sometimes it does. And usually, of course, when you don't expect it, right? So, and right, here's a good one. And this is the same street still for now. Back in 2006, a man was doing the naughty thing. He was shoplifting, and a security guard saw him, and he was chasing him. The guy ran down the street, and there was like a dead end, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm caught and screwed," right? But when he turned around, the security guard was not there. Instead, he saw different stores and a different type of time frame. And he thought, what? Because apparently a lot of these people haven't always heard these stories before, I don't know. He went to this store, and he saw the newspaper magazine had said that it was May 18th of 1967. About a year and a half before I was born. And he went into a store called H. Samuel. I think it said H. Samuel. And when he went back outside, it all of a sudden was his time again. And he better start running again, right? He was telling people about all this, and they found out that the security guard also, when he was chasing him, all of a sudden the guy just disappeared right before his eyes, like he lost him. So the guy did disappear into another time. So they're not exactly sure why, if it was the deposits of limestone and quartz, or that the rails, or I think they said the railways or something, were circular and tight. I don't know. They're so, you know what? Who knows? There's theories, you know. Who knows why things happen the way they do? They do, you know. Sometimes people don't believe until they experience it, and for those people who don't believe it, who say, I ain't gonna experience it. First of all, I would say, be a little careful what you wish for. I guess there's a part of me that does want to experience that, and there's a part of me that only wants to experience it if, like, it 2 seconds later or 2 minutes later or whatever, and it's a fun place to be at, and then I'm back, because I wouldn't want to be like stuck back in time or forward in time, right? So, and here's another. This is in Wales, Pembroke, Wales. A guy named Roger told of a tale when he was young. Right, him and his family went to this castle in Wales, Pembroke Castle, and they were climbing the tower, they were on the outside, and they were climbing up to the tower area, and he got there first because, like lots of young people do, they like 2 floors up, and when he got out there and he looked off, he went top, and he looked off, and there was a river out there. There was a river out there, anyway. But in the river, he saw medieval-looking ships. And at first he just, I mean, of course, he didn't think, oh my goodness, I'm back in time. He just thought, oh, they're having some sort of, little thing out there. And a little event, like sometimes they might. And he kind of got excited, and so he pulled his parents up and said, look. But there were none of those by the time they got there. They just like all poof, disappeared. So, okay, let's see if there was another story. There was a Leeds Castle, a woman named Alice Pollock, and she was psychic, right? This is an interesting one. And she visited Henry the Eighth's room, I think, old room. And she was into psychometry. She had the gift where you touch something old and all of a sudden it like transports you somewhere. So it's not exactly a time slip per se. It might be sort of like reading of the Akashic records, like they say, or something. But she was in this room and she was touching all these objects. And all of a sudden, she sees this lady, this tall lady in this room that she's in. And all of a sudden, the carpets aren't there anymore. There's a big roaring fireplace with piles of logs in it. And she only sees it for like 2 seconds, right? And then it goes back and she's like, huh. Come to find out later on, she was seeing, I know I have that on here somewhere. I think it's on the next page. She found out that the room had been a prison room for Joan of Navarre, who lived from 1368, was born 1368 and died like 1437, excuse me. She was Henry V's stepmom and was accused of plotting against the king. And so as she sees her pacing back and forth, looking very focused and I guess you would if you thought you were going to be beheaded or something, right? But thankfully, this lady did actually get proven to be innocent, and so did not get her head lopped off. So not a bad story, but that would be so strange to see back in the time and really know what they look like, not just in a painting that may look pretty similar, but in living color, right? I think that would be very, very cool. And I always thought it would be cool to be one of those people who can touch an object. And we could probably all learn to do this. We probably all have the gift of some of these things. Touch an object and then, whoop, this next one, there was this guy, and this is a now, of course, more nowadays one, because that lady back that was doing the psychometry, she was back in the early 1900s. But now we're back in the present moment again. Sunday afternoon, a couple, and sometimes they're at home and they kind of get a little, what can we do? Do you remember when we used to just pick up the phone and just call an old number just to see if it's still, So they decided to do this. Even though his grandparents had passed like at least 25 or more years ago, he decides to call, his grandparents had lived in Mexico, and he decided to call his grandpa's and grandma's number. And I'm sure he thought he would get like, sorry, this is no longer in, but that's not what he got. He did not get that. He got a ringing telephone. So he thought, okay, if somebody answers, I'll just say, hey, and talk with them. And it was on speaker. And he's a man answers, and he's thinking, this is my grandpa's voice. And he's in shock, and it takes him a few minutes to actually talk. And he's like, Grandpa, is that you? This is Joe. This is this is your grandson, Joe. And his grandpa was saying, This can be Joe. I have little Joe with me right here. So he went really back in time on that one. But he got so flustered that he accidentally hung up the phone. Yeah. And when he calmed himself enough to call again, he got exactly what he thought he was going to get the first time. Sorry, this number is no longer in service. Can you imagine that one? Now, this last one, and I think it is the last one. This couple does what a lot of us do. They get a little extra pocket money and they say, let's do a road trip. So they do a road trip. They're in Texas, and they're planning on doing the road trip still within Texas, you know. They took their map and they made like a little circular thing, and then they visited a lot of places. I think they said it was like 5 days, and on their way back home, when they were driving on a freeway, they were getting hungry. So they saw this over, this cafe that was open all night long. So they go to this cafe, and they're thinking the decor looks a little outdated, but, they sat down, the food was great, and it was about all you can eat. So, and the waitress was very friendly. So, they got up to go, and the cash register is one of those little boo-boo, bing, and it comes in, not like the cash register of today. And they're like, okay, well, maybe they wanted it to go with the decor, but who cares, because the food was great. So we got out like $20, $30. I think he said 20. And she said, that'll be about $9. He was like, what? And he gave her the 20 and said, keep the change. Of course, she was really excited about that. And so she said, come back and see us anytime. And so they left. 2 weeks later, and I think this happened in December, they said, of 2014. In December, 2 weeks later, they came back for another, because it was only it was close to their house, only like a couple of hours, an hour or two away. So they went back. And there was no building. I mean, there was a building, but it was like a broken down, burned up building. And they go to this gas station and say, I think it was a gas station, and that was right by there, and they're like, what happened to this restaurant that was here? And they said, how did you know it was a restaurant? Well, because 2 weeks ago we ate there. That hasn't been a restaurant for 40 years. What? And then he took the phone and he showed him everything. It burnt to the ground, and everyone was killed. And then he saw the waitress also. She had also been killed. But of course, before anyone says, yes, it goes, no. They went back in time when she was most likely alive. Maybe not too long before she, got burned up, poor lady, in the fire. But, yeah, that's kind of a sad one. But, everything, as we know, is happening really at once. So it just sort of puts on a really cool spin. I really love these stories. But anyway, as this video is already getting to the 20-minute almost, I shall end it there and say, over and out. Have a happy, wonderful Friday night, weekend ahead, and don't get caught up in those portals. Or maybe you want to. Maybe it would be cool to get caught up in the time slip. What about that? And what do you think about time slips? Obviously, it seems to happen enough. Either everyone's making up these stories, they're imagining things, or there really is such a thing. I think the last one is true, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Anyway, over and out.